and you got to get out there all by yourself. You can't have a crowd. You can't have noise. I mean, I've had mice run up my legs, and I had a flying squirrel come down and land right next to me. I've had deer come up and just about take my hat off, putting their nose in my ear.
Hunting and trapping kind of go together. The best thing is your interaction with wildlife. What you see, the fabulous stuff you see in the woods. You know, an animal chasing another animal, the predator-prey. You just learn so much by watching sign. And sign might be tracks, it might be wind, it might be, you know, whatever it is, you just become an expert on reading sign. And that's I think that's my biggest joy, and it still is.
Man wasn't made to be caged in a high-rise condo. But out there, you know, providing, hunting, gathering, whatever you want to call it. And now they're bored out at the tears. When I grew up, we had no television. I didn't have television in my house until I was a senior in high school. I'm happy in heck.
Well, it's a very peaceful. The woods can be like this. It can be very peaceful, but when nature forces, storms come up, it can be a very, very cruel place to be.
There's no light, so the sky is much brighter, the stars are brighter. In fact, I've kayaked in the night around 10 o'clock. I was going around a corner and I came across billions and billions of fireflies, all lit up in one spot. And I think that was their mating. That's why they were all gathered there. And I never had a camera to take a picture of that. It was just amazing.
For more than a century, the Maine woods has been home to a special breed, hunters and sportsmen, and sportswomen. Their connection to the woods, the rivers, the lakes, and the wildlife is a strong bond, both to the land and to each other. Many of them, like Gary Day, were introduced to the woods at a young age.
My dad was a trapper, and he loved to hunt and fish. In this area up around the border, Canadian border, he used to go up there with another group of men, and they hunted and fished. And then, of course, come November and October, he trapped around the area, the New Sharon and Farmington and that area. And I loved to go with him. In fact, he even says when I was 4 years old, he'd put me in his pack basket and take me with him, you know.
First time I went hunting, I was probably 6 years old after Dad died, with one of the guides that worked for us. And I don't know, I had a little pea shooter, but I thought I was going to shoot a big buck. And of course, he had a real gun. And I can still remember the awe and the fear that went with walking through the woods with this old guide. And, you know, I just knew I was going to see a deer behind every bush, and never did.
We used to do a lot of hunting after school nights and weekends. And I always took a week off from school and went to Enchanted with my dad every Thanksgiving week every year for 40 years, I guess, 30 years anyway. Yeah. I used to get in a lot of trouble at school, have to make up all the hours that I missed and all the work that I missed. But we used to do a lot of duck hunting on the Sheepscot River. And when the tide was right, I had a friend, a real close friend, that had a boat. His dad had a boat, and he had all the equipment. But we'd take our shotguns to school, and there was a roundhouse at the narrow gauge railway below the school, down right on the edge of the river. We'd take our guns down there and hide them in the morning early on the way to school, and then when we got out of school, we'd just go down and take the guns, and he'd have the boat close by, so we'd head up the river and go duck hunting.
Hunting and woods traditions were passed down in families that ran sporting camps or hunted on accessible land. Dr. Robert Shelton still lives on land near Winthrop, once owned by his parents.
Living in central Maine, my dad was raised on a farm. His mother was a great hunter. He loved the outdoors. He loved the land. And from where we're sitting, about 500, 600 feet to our south, was where my folks had a cottage before I was born. And every summer the day school was out, we came out there and lived the entire summer. And we had to stay until everything in the garden was killed by frost, so we prayed for an early frost so we could go back to town.
Veterinarian Paul Wade owns Northern Pride Sporting Camp near Cocadjo. His family hunted at sporting camps near Greenville.
My grandfather, on my mother's side, was the hunter, and he and my grandmother would go to Spencer Pond camps up by Little Spencer Mountain every year deer hunting. And in those days, they'd go for a month. They wouldn't go for a week or a weekend. And it would take them a day to get there by buckboard and horses from Greenville.
And Matt Libby Sr.'s family has operated a hotel and sporting camp near Oxbow since the 1890s. Initially, sportsmen traveled to the hotel and camps by train.
That's how they got close. You know, if you were out of New York, you would start either on a train, or if you wanted to save some money, you'd go on ship. And you go by ship to Portland and then train from Portland or Boston to Masardis by train. And then Masardis, we would pick you up by buckboard, take you into Oxbow, which was a while. It took a while to get there. It was probably 16 miles or so to the Libby Hotel, and they'd stay at the hotel that night, and then they would canoe the next morning up to one of our two river camps. And if they were late in the day, they would stay at our lean-to camps, and then if they were early in the day, they'd go up further and spend the night, and then the next day went all the way to camp.
It was a 2-day canoe trip to get to the camp.
I mean, my great-grandfather started in lumber, but when the train came to Masardis was a train station, that all changed. All of a sudden, there was people that had interest in hunting moose and caribou. And his first, he actually started a hotel in Oxbow called the Libby Hotel, and began putting up loggers, lumbermen, and then that changed to fishermen and hunters when the train came in the 1890s.
And they came from all over, from Philadelphia, Boston, and New York, often with their families.
And the reason that they brought their families was, back in the day, the disease in those cities was terrible. So you look at our old advertisements, and they came, sparkling spring water. They say clean air was always big in the ads, because that's who we were going after. Not only the guy, the husband, the dad, the granddad wanted the good hunting and fishing. They wanted to keep their kids and wife healthy.
My wife cooked everything. She wouldn't let me cook. The only thing I cooked was scrambled eggs. And they were in the big scrambled egg, big one, big bunch of 6 dozen at a time eggs. So we'd have breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then maybe a bag lunch at noon, and then they'd come in for a big meal after hunting or fishing.
Of course, I wasn't around the 40s, but I've seen the camps on the island as they existed. After they got to the main lodge, the cabins were pretty fancy for the time. Some of the tools of the trade, if you will, that have come down in the family was bed warmers, the soapstone bed warmers. We still have some of those around. So if you had women in camp, they would put the bed warmers in between the sheets, warm it up for them. They had, the linen napkins and tablecloths, and everything was pretty fancy for what they had. Now, they didn't have running water. They had bed springs, the old cross bed spring. I forget what they call them, but with mattresses, depending on what you paid, what kind of mattress you got.
So we had 10 camps all together that we rented, and everything was a family run. When the children were old enough, they helped. They helped with firewood. They helped with building camps. They were always with us.
The electricity started with me, my wife, and she decided she wanted, I think it must have been a washing machine. But she was still she was still using the wringer washer, so I might be mistaken, but there's something she wanted to run with electricity. So we got this small welder generator, because I could weld. I'd worked as a millwright in the winter as well. And it was noisy. Oh, man, it was noisy. It was awful. And, of course, we had it right near camp because we had no wire. We couldn't afford heavy wire to get it any further from camp, and didn't know a whole lot about it. But, as soon as you give a woman one electric outlet, it's over.
For many of the sporting camps, providing guide services for the hunters was part of the package. Gary Day is a licensed guide.
Number one, you got to know the woods. You don't get lost. And you remember where the truck is when you left. But you got to know the habits of the animal.
That means studying the wildlife and its movements in the woods.
They don't always stay in the same area, but they'll stay right in a 4 or 5 mile radius. And if there's some cows in that area, you find out where they are, because that's where the bulls will head during the mating season, and that's why you take your hunter.
The woods were also home to fur-bearing animals that provided a living for trappers. Oscar Cronk trapped beaver in the North Woods. He mastered the art of reading the ice during the winter trapping season.
I've always found with my pole axe that you go along and you hit the ice. If it sounds like a dull sound, like it's, you can hear it. It doesn't echo too much. But if you get into thin ice, it'll be very hollow. You'll hear it because it's thin. It's, when you hit that thick ice, it doesn't get down through into the sound. But with the thin ice, you hit it like that, and you'll hear it. I've gone up beaver flowages, what they call the inlet, where the stream comes in, and I would like that, and it seemed pretty good. The next time I'd reach up, axe go right through.
At 86, Cronk is a master of the woods, trapping and manufacturing and selling scent to lure fur-bearing animals to his traps. Some of his trapping and woodsman skills were passed down to him from his mentor, Vincent Hicks.
He knew the country. He didn't use a compass. He would take the direction from the wind or the sun. Yeah, he was a great woodsman. I was very fortunate. I trapped 5 years with him. And so his knowledge became my knowledge. A real trapper, that he'll see things that the average person will never see. I tell deer hunters, I said, if you want to really be a good deer hunter, start to trap. And I said, you will realize right off quick, that there's little signs that you'll see you're looking for, that you'll never really see them, as a hunter.
And Day's enthusiasm for trapping was handed down from his family.
I just enjoyed it, and I couldn't wait till he got to the next trap, and whether it was a skunk or a raccoon or a fox, it was always exciting. And I'd say, finally I talked him into letting me have some, would he let me have some traps, and he just gave me the little ones so I wouldn't get hurt, and went down and showed me how to set them, and from then on it's been every trapping season you're out trapping.
There have been many changes in the woods over the decades. Lumbering companies have become more mechanized, transitioning from horses to machines, and changes in lumber harvesting techniques have meant changes in the landscape and wildlife habitat. Remote camps that were once accessible only by airplane are now served by roads.
That country at that time had not been clear-cut. There was a lot of old growth, a lot of hardwood. There was we'd go in there for a week and we wouldn't see another person other than the people in our own group. There was only one road in there, and now it's been all clear-cut and there's roads all over that country.
The camps have changed because we've upgraded. We've gone, as I said, from a kerosene light to electric light, and with candles and whatever in between, but the woods have changed. There's no question. The cutting has changed. The ability for logging to take place, when it started, when I was first in there, we had horses, and they would haul down to the rivers and do the waterway, and then when the roads came in, it was still horses and bulldozers, and then from bulldozers to skidders, and then from skidders to feller bunchers, and cut the link systems now, where the guys don't even get out of the cabs.
To a person, what hunters and outdoorsmen and women in Maine want most is to leave something for the next generation. Each has a passion for conservation.
Hunters are probably the best conservationists in the world because without habitat and animals, we have nothing to hunt. And when we do hunt, we provide, especially in Africa, well, everywhere, even in Maine, huge industry for employment.
Each has his or her own wish to ensure the woods remain accessible.
I'd like the next generation to go out there and experience the woods just like I have. Be there with the wildlife. You can't do it in a zoo, you can't do it in a movie theater, you can't do it on TV, you can't do it in a game. Just go out there with somebody that knows the woods.
I've already got grandchildren that are hunting, and I hope that their kids are still able to get out and enjoy the outdoors. They don't have to be hunters. They can just get out and be in the outdoors, you know. I don't care if they're a bird watcher, if they enjoy watching, you know, just enjoying the wildlife and being out there. Hopefully it will always stay so that they'll be able to do that.
You know, we have 500 acres, and I've already talked to my son and daughter about it, that I don't plan on developing it, and actually made it so they can't develop it. I want them to know what I know, that as far as, you know, the birds and the beasts that roam here, how they can hunt them, fish them, or just watch them in their natural habitat. You know, I like to have the natural environment that my great-grandfather started with. I'd like to have the same thing for them to experience that same.
When you go into the woods and you're by yourself, it's just so quiet and it's so relaxing. That's what probably I would wish everybody would have that opportunity.